Great. Well, welcome everybody. Anna, I think just to say that Anna and I were in the same youth group when we were teenagers, which was not so very long ago. And since then, both of our lives have taken an extraordinary meandering path really through different places and experiences. And when I started to think about the kinds of people I might want to kick this off with, Anna sprang to mind fairly quickly. So thank you very much for being a sort of a guinea pig. Lovely to have you from Florida. Thanks for joining us. I'm just going to throw it over to you. Now, the context of this is an informal session. So if there's something you can't hold in and you want to say, then please do chip in. But for the first part, at least, I'm going to ask Anna to share what she has learned, or one thing that she's learned. Thanks,
okay.
Anna, over to you.
Thank you. First, a disclaimer, although Florida, you might think I'm baking in the sun, we're actually in the panhandle, so it's like the top of Florida. We're not in the boot. So actually it's 7 degrees. I've just looked it up. So we are also not warm, we're not hot, but it is a beautiful blue sky, and weather's going up and down. Killed all my grapefruit and lemon trees, which wasn't very nice because I was having lots of lemons and grapefruits. Anyway, hey, such is life, lots of change. So yeah, this isn't going to be about how I make tea or anything like that. If anybody knows me, they'll know it's not going to be about tea or much about the weather, though that has come into it, and it always does because I get cold. So this is about, I think I'd prefer to say it's more like what is becoming clearer to me. Knowledge implies for me all about my head and what I've learned and what I can tick off. And I'm finding as life goes on, I've known a lot in my life, and now I'm ditching a lot of what I've known and reformulating it and incorporating my body, because I grew up, but everything below here, we didn't really talk about or think about. It was all up here. So that's about knowledge. So it's about what I feel I'm getting a bit clearer on. And it's really, well, I'll start with a story. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning for everybody else. And I was walking around my neighborhood to visit a friend. And I needed to have actually a crucial conversation. You know that difference between something that's important, something that's urgent, but actually there are things that are crucial. You know, it's a crossroads in our relationship. And I needed to talk to her about something that really would mean whether our relationship carried on or I just stopped, if I ever could, being a good girl, Anna. So I was walking and I was thinking about what I was going to say. And that was fair and good. I needed to do that about my points and thinking about how I would stand, what I would say when I knocked on the door. And I went on, and I found myself thinking about, okay, she would say this back. I'd then say this, and she would probably say this. So I would be, well, what is the evidence for what I'm saying? Oh, hold on. And I would be thinking back maybe 4 or 5 years. Oh, there was that oh, yeah. And before I realized it, I realized that I had planned the whole hour conversation. I had noticed my hands, which were really tense. And I was actually a bit thirsty. There was no saliva in my mouth. And I suddenly realized, as a good clinical psychologist that I was, that I was in full fight and flight mode. I was ready to kind of go for it, fight, or actually on the alternative, I think I was ready to be more kind of like I might run, fight and flight. I might run away before I even got that far. And fortunately, I noticed before I got to her house and, you know, managed to take some deep breaths and just stop and realized I had envisioned the whole scenario without anybody else in the room, in the house, in the street. Then I began thinking about other situations, how I might be imagining playing over a situation that I had at work, a conversation with somebody that I needed to have, or a task that I needed to be doing. And again, I would be planning it perhaps time in advance, but going beyond the normal. Don't get me wrong, planning is great. We've lived in a war zone, took 2 kids that were 2 and 4, had to plan the whole curriculum educationally, clothes, everything we would need for a year. I needed to plan in depth. But it was when it was tipping over that planning stage into the next stage. So I realized that there was actually an invitation, which I guess is my invitation to you today in thinking about this. The question, the invitation is, what are you giving your energy to? And that is what I am becoming clear about in my life. What am I giving my energy to? And then not, simply not. But that's all very tricky, really, because, you know, I go down these rabbit holes, if you like. But what it does is it depletes me and reenacts situations, anticipates situations that actually I don't need to be bothered about. But it's taking my energy, and energy we now know is kind of the building blocks of the universe. And I have a choice in my own life. That is one thing I can change. I can choose what I attend to and what I don't attend to. There's the classic situation about, you know, social media. The other day I was looking up something online, some latest face cream or something. I don't know what it was. No, it was nail polish, because you've got to have nail polish that's ethically whatever, that doesn't hurt animals or whatever. So, and I realized then everything I went on, there was all this nail polish coming on, all these, I was thinking, that's weird. They really know, they're really trying to help me. No, this is the algorithm that just happens. When you press stuff, you get feedback. And it's a negative feedback loop. And realizing there's so many times I get into what I put in, I get back. It's the same as if you follow, you know, the news, and everybody will, oh, you know, Trump, because we live in America or whatever. Oh, I've read this morning something about, you know, is he going to go for 2024? So, you know, you start going and you click and you click. Well, I don't now, but you just get more and more information back. And it's the bots, it's the algorithms, but it's my energy that's going. Doesn't change anything, but it actually can affect my mood. It affects my relationship to other people. It affects what I talk about, what I think about. And we know, because everything is interrelated, that actually long-term is going to affect my health. Just in a very simple way, when I walked around the corner to see Mandy, I was tense. And we know that produces chemicals in our body, the cortisol, the adrenaline, and it doesn't do you much good. So the question is, what are you attending to? And there's different areas. One is that struck me. One is the area of relationships. We were going back to England at Christmas, and never easy. You know how it is, as everybody wants to see you, but it was family, particularly. And I have got COVID, by the way. You can't tell, but I've got COVID. So my voice is a bit scratchy. And we had some pushback about how long we should be in each place. And nobody seemed to notice that we were spending a lot of money to take everybody back to England, 7 of us. But they wanted us to be in different places at different times. And we found ourselves going beyond what was necessary to think about it. Doug, can you chip in for me and finish the story?
Yeah, so basically, so the thing kind of like really erupted in terms of an issue between my sister and my mum and myself, where they seem to be sort of saying, well, we want you to actually do absolutely everything we want. And it seemed like there was no concern, I guess, for us to, you know, our planning and our time and what we wanted out of the situation. And I found myself going down the rabbit hole, you know, of feeling really offended, And I got into these imaginary conversations and what I would write and what I wouldn't write, and writing an email and all the rest. This is 3 months before we actually went at Christmas. And I suddenly realized, no, I'm just putting, this is just making me miserable. And I am putting all this negative energy into this situation. And actually, I really didn't think that either my mum or my sister really kind of like understood any of it, and it was being effective at all, but it was being very negatively effective on me. And so basically we just pulled out, and not of the planning, but of the mental gymnastics that we were going through, and said, okay, we go, we make the best of it. We don't get uptight. We go through the whole of the process, but we don't put tons and tons of energy into it. And it was fine. And nobody bothered even saying anything at Christmas. So
Anna, are you able to carry on? I don't want to...
Yeah, I mean, so I was just going to basically say, maybe I'll leave it there and I can chip in again in a bit, but
okay.
What are the comments? What do you think? What do you feel? So one comment is, rather than think, you just put your hand on your heart, which I'm learning more and more to do. When I hear that phrase, it's an invitation to what do I give my energy to? What does it feel like? Because it's a bit different to me than thinking about, I've got to do something. What does it feel like if I can just stop my energy and just say, like Doug just said, so just stop. Don't give your energy to that. And that for me was a real game changer. It's difficult because I find, but it involves me stepping back and starting to notice. It involves me being quiet, maybe reviewing a situation. And I'm not used to doing that. Certainly how I grew up, but certainly in recent years, that's much more what I'm doing. Starting to notice what my body's doing, what my mind is doing, and yeah, just saying, no, stop. Maybe some reflections from anybody.
Anna, could I ask, are you saying that you shouldn't be doing things that don't give you that positive energy?
I'm not, it's not about particularly not doing things. It's just about noticing what serves you and what doesn't serve you, if you like. It didn't serve me well to spend all that time thinking about this relationship to this friend or going back to England. And yes, if you like, then that was negative energy. So it's more than just positive thinking. It's more about noticing where my energy is going, with my body, with my time, with my head, and with my heart, really. Gets kind of stuck here. Does that
Just the reason I asked was that I was thinking, just this week, I've had several conversations with people about the importance of relationships and about the ones that are really valuable to you and give you that positive energy, and making sure you nurture them. But it made me also think that there are relationships which maybe don't fill me with energy, but they're important for the other person. And even though it might be some negative energy to me, actually it's important that that relationship continues.
Yeah, and I think that's obviously important. And I think it's up for each of us to know when we are going to invest or be involved with somebody that does drain us, because otherwise we would be living in a totally, me focused universe. But I think it's that awareness of, okay, this is actually not going to be life-giving for me, but it's something I choose to do, but I'm not going to let it take up more of my head than it should. So I've got an example, somebody that wanted to talk to me, and he desperately needs to, conversation, but I feel drained afterwards. I feel, oh, for goodness sake, you know what you should do it, But I want to be there for him. He's in a different place. He's in a hard place. So it's me going in, knowing that, but then not afterwards or beforehand, oh, stupid man, why doesn't he do this? Or, you know, or also alternatively, oh, I wish I could do more. What could I do? It's about the parameters of that relationship. Does that make sense?
I've got quite a good example of that from recent history here in France. Some of you will know we had a tenant living behind us who lived in just sort of 50 yards from our back door, and he's a very troubled man and troublesome man as well, actually, both of them. But he had a particular, now those of you that know me will know that I think I can solve everyone's problems and save the world single-handedly. I always think I can help everybody who I come across, and I try. And this particular chap, I thought, oh, I can sort him out. He's, you know, he's completely lost, but I can sort him out. Well, not at all. In fact, quite the reverse. He got into my head in the way that you were just describing, Anna. And I've never really known anything quite like it. So he's left the property 6 months ago now, but he stayed plaguing me in my head for weeks and weeks after he left. And in fact, he still, if he was able to, sends me emails, which for a while I was just deleting without reading, and now I've managed to block them. But he had a particular way of manipulating my brain, so that whatever I did, it was never going to be enough. But the effect on me was kind of very dramatic, and I didn't know what to do about it really until Sarah, my wife, said to me, what he's hungry for is a response. He's looking for you to respond, and that when you respond in the way that he's hoping for, he's got what he wants, but it sucked it out of you. And it was such a sort of lightning bolt of insight to me. And the only way out of that was to cut him off, which goes almost against every fiber of my nature, actually. But I wasn't doing him any good, and he was dragging me into the depths. So yeah, I just really think that thing about energy and what you pour into it. But other times there have been people who I have been able to help, and it was right to, and they needed somebody alongside them. So I think your comment about balancing that and judging that, and sometimes we need people like Sarah, my wife, to help us with that and to judge that and to see where that balance lies.
I think another example too, I mean, that's a great one, Steve, is, you know, when I've kept friendships going for too long because, you know, I'm nice like you, Steve. I feel I should be friends with everybody. But if you take that, you know, literally, I'm going to have so many people because I'm naturally a connector and a networker that I get drained. And one time in our life, we actually had so many people that every weekend was full, evenings were full. And it's just the kind of people we are, but also me, actually less so than my husband, who's a bit more of an introvert, because I would, at the end of every encounter, they'd say, oh, we must meet up again. And I'd say, oh, yes, we must. Well, Anna had said that, so Anna must follow through. It's not just a how are you, I'm fine, thanks, a social thing. So I would reach out to people. So I decided, even way back, to make a conscious decision to keep my mouth shut at the end of an encounter. And if they said it, I'd say, oh yeah, great. But then I would not, and I'd have to steel myself because it was against who I felt I was, not reach out. And you know what? They didn't reach back either. And that was a real lesson, because not everybody, you know, wants that reciprocal thing. And if they really wanted it, I have to believe in their own agency and power to do that and ask me, rather than me just initiate. And so it was about letting things go. And recently here I had somebody who, every time I met them for coffee, initially it was great, but then things began to shift in their life and mine. We'd still keep meeting up, but I'd come home exhausted, a bit irritated. They would never, ever ask me a question, which I've got a thing about. People that aren't curious are asking you the question. And this went on time and time again, but I would always say, hi, how are you doing? And she would say, great. And I'd say, we should meet up sometime. And she'd say, yes, we must. So I'd say, how about Tuesday? But I stopped doing that and she stopped reaching out. And rather than me then feeling, oh, I'm sure she really wants me to reach, it's like, no, she's a grown up and I need to treat her as such. Because I can't keep doing that for everybody, because my energy is just going to get thinner and thinner for the people that, you know, do want a healthy relationship. I know it's not black and white, but I think it's much more about noticing, as I was really saying to Rosemary, what you're doing and when and how and to whom.
Just a quick thing about good friend Clive is on this meeting, and a few years ago he met somebody new, and more than anyone I know, he's hungry and interested in anything that's going on all the time. And he met this new person and he said to me, Steve, I haven't got time for another friend. And I think that's very pertinent to what you were just saying. You know, how far can you spread yourself? Just to welcome Amanda, who's been able to connect. Welcome. Can you hear us, Amanda?
Sorry.
Is that all coming through?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, that's great. I just wanted to quickly summarize where we've got to. So Anna has introduced the session talking about things that are becoming clearer as each year goes by. And the question she posed to us is, what are we giving our energy to, and what effect is that having on us? So we're just discussing that at the moment.
Thank you.
Great effect, actually.
Thanks. I'm sorry about I couldn't connect earlier. It was I've had problems, technical problems.
No, you're here with
Anyway.
us now. That's great. That's great.
Okay, thanks.
Chris.
Hi, I obviously took the dip out, but thanks for the summary. I'm just interested, we were talking about relationship just now and how to kind of manage when it gets difficult and energy consuming. And Shti, you mentioned a relationship which naturally came to an end because the other individual absented themselves from the area. I don't know about the ones that Anna was talking about, but historically, some of you will know, I had a particular situation with somebody who lived very near to me. Now, the whole of the difficulties that we had were, I guess, resolved in the sense that eventually that other person did leave the area. And so it wasn't technically possible to have too much interaction. And there are other people these days whose friendship or relationship depend on things like phone calls because of the way we are and where we are. And they're relatively easy to manage in the sense that you mentioned, Anna, that if you don't initiate an approach, then and it doesn't come, then you know where you are. But has anybody got any particularly helpful ideas about how we can manage situations where there is an individual who's living nearby that it's really not easy to avoid some interaction, but it's difficult to have a positive interaction, and yet it's hard to not have any kind of contact? Does that make sense?
I mean, I think the person I was talking about still lives here.
Right.
And the one I was walking towards.
Sorry, I missed that bit of the thing. So
okay, yeah. So it's just I was walking towards her and planning this conversation for a crucial conversation, which was a crossroads in our relationship. And the outcome was, it was like, no, there wasn't going to be a relationship anymore. And they live here. So I think there's about polite civility and kindness. But it's me not doing my usual and being more aware of what my usual is, which is ask a lot of questions. So when I bump into her at the grocery store, it's, hi, how are you doing? Fine, thanks. How are you? Great. Okay, good to see you. Bye. Which is the antithesis of what Anna does. I want to know all about what's going on. And I still do, even though our relationship is difficult. So I think it's about the golden rule of being kind, And that doesn't mean avoiding them or snubbing them, but it means just being kind, but being wise, because I like to see that I'm protecting me and I'm protecting my energy, which is finite. Whereas I grew up thinking, you know, to whom much has been given, much will be expected. Therefore, shove it all out there and you'll be fine. That well will be filled. Well, it actually won't. It's about just being tough. Is it tough love? I don't know. But I think it's being kind, but not going the extra mile. No, that isn't what's being required. I don't know about anybody else. Anybody else?
But I just think that this is where somebody else alongside can help from time to time. Depends, every situation is different. But I mean, my sort of insight came through somebody else, Sarah, as it happened. But you know, you can't always see where the balance is if you're in the situation. In fact, sometimes you really can't see that, and you just are spending yourself more and more with no hope of a result, really. So somebody else might help is another thought.
I was going to say, I think I was talking about this week, actually recently. So I'm thinking about what I'm going to do when I retire. And I have made a decision. I'm going to live on a boat and go sailing. And I bought the boat and I'm living on it. But it's been such a tortuous decision. But I think the heart, one of the reasons it's difficult is that when I was in my 20s, making a 2-year decision was easy because there would be loads more 2 years. So now making a decision that could be 5 years, let's say, it feels like a big decision because I can only do it once. So, okay, so one thing I was going to say was I'm much more mindful of what I focus on now because I feel like I've got less time and there are more things I seem to want to do. And then the second bit is, so Steve's heard me say this before. Somebody said to me a long time ago that you have friends for a reason, a season, and life.
Like it.
And yeah, I've always liked that. And so, so it's useful because actually you may have somebody who's a friend for a reason because they live nearby you, and but actually ending a friendship can be difficult. And so you might have, I don't know, let's think, you might have university friends and you send Christmas cards to for the next 20 years, but the reality is actually you aren't really friends anymore. You were friends because you were at university together, but it sort of ended. And I had a friend who was a close friend for a long time, and I moved to London, and they come to London a lot, and we saw each other a lot. But actually, it was hugely helpful to have more than one person point out to me that I was always hugely diminished after time with them. And it was only when I was really, really upset about the situation with them, they blamed me for them losing their job, basically. So that was a big thing for them, I get. And anyway, so I finally stood up to them and said, no, I'm not doing this anymore. And it was actually really difficult, and I still miss them, but I only miss the nice them. I don't miss the toxic bit, the bit that was diminished. So going back to the reason, season, life, it's recognizing that a time for a friendship has ended and actually just ending it.
Yeah.
It's easier said than done, but.
So what did you feel like? I mean, when you said you felt terrible, what did you feel like? And what did you do with those feelings?
Well, well, so the other thing that I've used a lot is transactional analysis. So basically, you and I are having an adult conversation. It's quite simple, really. So we're at an equal level. So if you are going to be toxic and abusive, let's say, you will go up and you will try and force me down because we're on a seesaw. And I will end up feeling like hard done by, abused, or whatever it is. And so really what I want with everybody is that adult relationship. And when I realize that, if I'm in a situation where I'm feeling like somebody's sort of like trying to force me down and control me or abuse me or whatever, what I've got to do is stay, and the phrase that jumps into my head is remain ruthlessly adult. And it's interesting when you say asking questions, because I do that in my head, because adults ask questions about situations. So, oh, here we go again. They're making me feel bad. Why is it that they're making me feel bad? And that questioning gets you back up into adult. There you go, pop psychology in 30 seconds.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's also along the lines of games people play, which is the same transaction.
That's transactional analysis, I believe. Anyway, yeah, it is. But you, for me, I've got to use it in the moment. So I distilled it to, if I'm in that situation, I'm just sit there going, oh, hang on a minute, this is interesting. They've made me feel bad again. And because on the spur of the moment, you can't get into the model, which I think a German wrote, and there's a million iterations of it and 3 books you have to read, but you can't do that on the spur of the moment.
So that's fascinating. So what you're doing is illustrating exactly what I've been saying about you have to stand back and take yourself out of where you are. And that is what is so hard to do when you start off, because we're all immersed, because it's our, you know, our emotions, our body are engaged, our chemicals are connecting to somebody else's, but we have to take that breath and stand back. And that's, I think, the key. And that's great that you've been able to do that. That's a wonderful example.
Thank you.
I'm interested by this standing message you're giving. So, Anna, you stood back, walked towards your friend's house, and Clive talked about real life going on in the station. I'm quite interested to know the trick put into that place, suddenly looking at a situation rather than being immersed. So Anna, maybe Doug, you talked about your family. What have you now in place to make yourself aware of what's going on?
I didn't quite get all of that.
So was it you saying, what do we actually do to help you?
Yes, because
back?
How can we notice what's going on? Because life just goes on and you don't realize. And Steve spoke about Sarah having a comment, and you now have put in place how to realize what's going on. How do we connect that in our minds to suddenly take that transition from going with the flow to analyzing our lives more?
I think from my point of view, given that I'm not at all prone to analysing anything very much, I have a kind of a sort of simplistic approach to life in general. And I think for me, I had to just go through a bit of agony in order to connect all of those things with the advice that Sarah had said. And I don't know, looking back, if there was any way around that, but I do feel I'm a way ahead of where I was in terms of my antennae being out for something like that again. And in fact, strangely enough, Clive and I had a conversation about this a few days ago, and it was along the lines of, when you spot the same thing coming up, you think, oh yes, I recognize that now because I've had that before. And so I think not a very satisfactory answer, but from my experience, I think it would have been that I had to go through a bit of pain in order to say there's something really not right here, and for somebody then to help me understand what that was and what was going on. But there may be other scenarios as well.
Yeah, so from my perspective with my sister, I think it's that I started, once you start to read patterns, which is really what Steve was saying, you start to see there are patterns and, oh, this is repeating. And as soon as you see, you know, maybe the first one, you do have to go through, like I did before Christmas, a whole load of angst and everything else before you realize what's happening. And having a second person, an observer, somebody that is actually dispassionate and reflecting back to you about what you're doing is really helpful. But once you've seen the pattern, I mean, I've sort of decided in my mind that, no, in terms of how I manage my relationships with my sister going forward, is I'm always going to be looking out for what am I being drawn into negative energy about and not go there. And so I think you set a tripwire on that relationship that is much earlier than the first time when you were still working it all out.
Okay.
And I just a really good story. This is a very long time ago with somebody that none of you know, but this was a friend of mine whose relationship with his sister had broken down to the extent you could not imagine that it could ever be reconciled. They were really at bitter loggerheads, and there were lots of stuff involved that made it very, very difficult for both of them. Anyway, I can tell you now that they go on holiday together and that relationship is completely healed. I mean, unfortunately, I don't know the strategies they adopted or how that worked, but I just throw that in as a sort of hope for the future that actually these things can be resolved sometimes with different strategies. So that's just, I mean, I was amazed when he told me he'd been on holiday and had a great time.
I think as well as I mean, Sarah implied, somebody said something about, you have to, you, Steve, about you have to go through the agony and the pain, because we basically don't like looking at ourselves and what's going on underneath and what's motivating us. It's a bit, some people call it your shadow, the kind of hidden bit of ourselves that we don't like to look at. But when we first noticed that, so when I noticed that I was walking towards Mandy's house and I was getting all prepared and what I was going to say, it was like, whoa, Anna, I thought you were just in the flow and you just went with whatever was going on, but here you are meticulously planning, worried about what she might think of you, and so I'd have to, that's a bit of a key about, what other people think of me. And so I had to look at some things, that's kind of some of the pain about the agony of people would know that, well, I wasn't still particularly close to her. Well, why aren't you? And I would just have to say, things have moved on, rather than say the whole story, which was not my fault, whatever. So it's about looking at ourselves in a way that's a bit more uncomfortable. And then it's about letting go would be the next stage, just like you did, Clive. I just have to let it go. And it will still come up, it will still needle, but because we've done the work, if you like, we can just say, it's that again, let it go. And that's where I find breathing really helpful. So, I think this whole awareness of our body, we're an integral system, we're not just our heads, and we can hold tension in our body that causes illness, psychological distress, and actually just breathing right from the belly, holding that breath and imagining that oxygen coming up inside us and being held in our lungs, and then letting it go and kind of like wash it out, just let it go. Surrender. Different religions have got traditions, have got different ways of talking about that. But basically, it's just about letting it go and not holding on to it, because when we hold on to things, that's when we start to, get disturbed. But that's also the key to, I'm feeling this again. Okay, maybe I need to look at this again. I haven't let this go. And some things I think in our lives, we have to just keep letting go. But it's not giving it the energy that we once did. It's just a little, okay, let it go.
That's what you've just said about letting go. It was probably a couple of years ago now, but it came to me suddenly as a bit of an insight that right from the very moment that we enter this world, we are starting to let go. As we are born, the first thing that happens is that the umbilical cord is separated. And then we have to grow away from those who are spending their time and attention caring for us. And so it goes on through life. And I thank you for reminding me of that, because as the years go by, Clive, you indicated that, like myself, you're not in the first half of life anymore, for sure. And that the days that we have are a bit limited. We don't know how many we have left, but we have to come to a point where we are ready to let go each day of something. But that doesn't mean that we're lost or alone.
Yeah, that's right. I remember somebody saying that every letting go is preparation for the big letting go. and we have to learn to do the little ones more and more so that we're ready as we all get to that bigger letting go. Yeah, that's good.
Could I just steer us back to where you started, Anna, which was about what are we giving our energy to? And I was thinking about this, and I could list out the things that I give my energy to, and many of them bring me happiness, joy, and fulfillment. But I suppose what it triggers in my mind is there something we should be giving our energy to, given our stage of life? I think most of us are a similar sort of era. Or is that not a valid question? I mean,
Intrigued by the use of the word should, Steve.
Well, yeah, there it is. There it is, right there.
Where does that come from?
Oh, it comes from a lifetime of trying to meet expectations that came, very early on. But I mean, maybe, and I just following on from what Chris just said, maybe one of the things we should, as in would be helpful, useful, and sensible to do, and to give our energy, is to thinking about letting go a bit more, since that's being raised.
I've got a suggestion. So Steve has met my trainer John, who's actually a good friend of mine, and trainer John, so I analyze everything. And I don't believe Steve when he says he doesn't, because he does, but I analyze everything. And trainer John's a bit more simplistic about things. And one of the things that he said, and I'd love to make one of these and give this to him, is he has a happiness barometer. And he decides whether he's going to do things generally on, and he imagines in his head whether the happy man's going to come out or the sad man's going to come out. And I love his idea of a happiness barometer, and I'd love to mock one up for him. And but he is a bit like that. And if he spends time on things that make him sad, then he's very clear that they're making him sad. And sometimes you do have to do things like that. But I think that's what I was saying about what I'm doing next. So I've thought a huge amount about what I'm spending my time on. And as you choose to do new things, then old things, they get squeezed out. You just don't have time to do them. So one of the things I've done is I've taken up clubbing in my 60s. It's the most amazing thing ever. Why I never did it in my childhood, I don't know. But living in central London, I can walk to one of my favorite clubs and get there at 12 and dance till 4 in the morning. It's unbelievable. But I've chosen to do something that necessarily has squeezed out other things, because if you go clubbing at a weekend, then frankly, you're not going to do a lot the next morning for sure,
That's great. That's great. And that gives me the opportunity to say the second thing I was going to say beyond that question was actually to offer some permission slips to each of you. And I think that ties in with the happiness thing, with, yeah, I'm just going to go clubbing. We're into music too in ways we never dreamt, and we weren't in our earlier years, going out to bars and listening to great music, the musicians, parties. But it's the permission slips that sometimes we need to give ourselves to do things that maybe we feel we can't have. Sounds like you've given yourself a lot, Clive. You're a great role model. Wow.
I don't know about that, but we my partner and I just had 4 days in Berlin clubbing, because that is the I was going to say epicenter, the pinnacle of clubbing. It actually felt like grasping 4 days and absolutely squeezing every ounce out of it. We only did one tourist thing, and that was go to if anyone's been to Berlin, the Topography of Terror, which is a museum to Nazism and the story of Nazism and what they did. And it just, I don't know why, I just wanted to go there. It felt like it was, it actually felt like Putin is trying to do something similar now. So I don't know why, it just called to me and we went there. Apart from that, it was clubbing.
I'd like to just make a comment about happiness, if I may. And that is, it feels to me that it's often a byproduct of doing other things. So if you seek happiness, you often don't find it. I don't seek happiness, but at the end of every day, I generally feel incredibly happy and fulfilled.
I guess, sorry, I haven't said much, sir, so far, but going back a bit, a few chapters, assuming you have a relationship with an energy sapping person, how does one discern whether they are actually they have a need which they see that you can help them with, or whether that person is a toxic type of relationship? Can anybody does anyone understand what I'm saying? You know, you recognize that this is a needy person, but maybe in some strange way you can kind of help them, and that's why you're having this relationship with them. And how do you discern whether it's a toxic thing? Yeah. And it's a dead end. It's never going to work out, and therefore you may as well ditch it. How do you make that kind of decision?
So sometimes I'm not sure that it's just about whether to ditch the person. I think sometimes you can stay in relationship with that person, as far as you think they're getting something out of it, and that you think that's still the right thing to do. But I think it is possible to sort of choose not to sort of get so emotionally involved in the negativity that swirls around them and swirls in you when you're before and after you're meeting them. So it's, to a certain extent, it's a question of cutting off the energy flow, even if you decide that actually they're a needy person and that you're fulfilling a useful role in their lives, and that's the kind thing to do. Now, I mean, there are other people to whom they're just using you and they're negative and it's toxic and you do need to cut. And I think that's where often you need other people helping, like your wife or spouse or a partner or friend to help you discern the difference between the two. But there's a difference between keeping the relationship and reducing the energy that you're putting into it and cutting the relationship. And both might be the right thing to do in different circumstances.
And I think for me, I think that's great. And I'd spend some time on my own, maybe just putting my hand on my heart, because we can analyze all we like, but we have to see what's going on inside our body. And I think that's what, again, I'm going to bang on about. We've kind of lost touch with what's going on inside here. It's got to do the right thing, whether they're needy or not. So just sitting with your hand on your heart, when somebody says they've just had a heart attack, you go, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And we automatically go to protect our hearts. So let's hear what our heart is saying by being quiet. And after you've met with them, or when you're about to go and meet with them, what's your heart saying? But it takes time, I think, to learn it. And it's nothing magical, but it's a kind of a discipline to see what are we feeling about this person? Am I doing this because I ought to do it, because there's nobody else around? Or what I've found is that when I've stepped away from somebody, they've actually found somebody else who's more suited, or it's driven them to actually get other help. It doesn't always have to be me, and it's sometimes my savior complex, perhaps. And trusting that the universe will meet what they want, and they will get what they want, even if it's actually not what they need. But checking in with me and sitting still with that. Yeah.
Anna, I'm going to ask you in a minute if you'd say just a little bit more about your permission slips, because I want to understand what you're giving me. It sounds great, whatever it is. But before that, I don't know, Amanda, if you wanted to have a chance to contribute. You absolutely don't have to, but we're coming towards the end of our time, so it was just to ask you if you wanted to be.
Yeah, okay. I was going to say to Malcolm that I suppose if you're not getting anything out of it, and if it's making you anxious or stressed yourself, then I would step away from it. And also, if you're in need and you try to talk that need through with that person, and you feel they're just not listening, then I suppose you've got to say, what are you getting out of it? So yeah, I think it's yeah, like, I guess a bit like you were just saying about what do you feel? How do you feel? How does it make you feel? If somebody makes me feel every time I'm trying to help them, and then they make me, and I realize every time I see them, I'm going to start feeling anxious because I know I'm going to get dumped on a load of negative stuff, I will probably avoid. I'll try and give my time from time to time, but I will avoid doing that too often. And going back to the previous conversation, I was thinking about, before I came on here, I was with a friend who's going through a really difficult situation with her hopefully soon to be divorced husband, who's a real nasty piece of work, and he's claiming things that through the divorce that he wants her to pay him for this, that, and the other, and there's children involved. Anyway, she was really feeling negative about all this, and I just helped her to take a step back and say, well, look at all you've achieved. So I guess that goes to somebody saying about counting all the positive things. So I listed to her, well, you've achieved this, 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 and this, and that did make her feel a lot better. And I think Rosemary was saying, sorry, I'm dipping into everybody's bits of conversation, but Rosemary, I really agree that in a day, when you count, you look back on your day and say, well, what were the nice things, what were the positive things, and which can be such simple things, and it really helps to sort of alleviate any negative stuff that happened in the day. Sorry, those are all three little bits of contribution.
That's we're running very short of time now, but I'm great to see Soji back with us. Would you like to chip in, Soji, before we wind the session up, if you can hear us? Or maybe you're busy with something. Hi.
Oh, hi.
I just wanted to give you a chance to contribute. You don't have to, but if you wanted to. But I know you've got many ideas in your head.
Anyway, first and foremost, I apologize. I quickly went to pick my daughter in school.
I knew that was where you'd gone. I imagined it.
And yeah, I actually joined this meeting today to learn from you guys on the board, because if you look closely in this circle, I seem to be the youngest here. I'm just in my 40s. I'm 43. And so I'm actually here to learn from you guys. And I have so much jotted down together. I've been jotting from what people are saying. And in fact, after this meeting, I'm still going to ask Steve to send me the recording. So for every part that I missed, so I can, pick from it. I learned so much from Mrs. Balfour. And I also picked from what Cliff said, So like I said, I'm learning from everybody. So that's why I'm here. I'm just here to observe and to learn.
Well, it's fantastic to have you with us, and for not at all just because you lower the average age. That's good, but it's just wonderful to have you with us. So we're going to have to wrap up now. Anna, I just wanted you to give a chance to finish up.
Yeah, just so the permission slips, basically, so notice where your energy is going, and then don't, just stop it, just notice. And then the permission slips, we have them at school, you got permission to go to the bathroom or whatever. What do you need a permission slip for? For me, it was actually recently a permission to give away my knitting that I've been going on to for 5 years. I should have sent it to one of you. Maybe Chris, you're a knitter. It got this big in like 4 years. I gave up and I changed the pattern. I was going to do squares and rectangles. I found a knitter And in theory, she's going to come back to a state park with her camper van in a year, come back with it, maybe. But I let it go, got it out of my sight. I didn't need to do it. I don't need to finish every book I start. I don't need to end every friendship, keep going with every friendship I've had since I was 7. I can let them go, just like Clive was saying. So what do you today need a permission slip for? Don't know.
Thank you. I'm going to guillotine the session there because I do want to keep it within the hour, except to say just thanks for taking the time out. I mean, a wonderful, diverse group of people from different parts of the, you shouldn't really all be together, but here we are. And my dream is that in the future, people join that I've never met before, and we're building towards that. So there's a whole program of sessions. The next one is on Thursday morning at 8 o'clock in the morning UK time, which is a 15-minute thing about climate change. And even though the content will build on that, I'm determined that every month on the 1st of the month, I at least will remind myself that we should all be doing something about climate change. And if you want to jump in on that, it's the initial one is about swapping ideas. It builds on the symposium that some of you I had 3 years ago now for my 60th birthday about what can we do to change the future, and there are things we can do. So that's Thursday morning at 7. Check the website for more exciting developments. Thank you very much for turning up, especially to Anna for that wonderful kind of steering us through. And you people have opened up, been honest, vulnerable, and that really means that we're doing something useful, which is the whole idea behind the knowledge exchange. Right. Thank you very much.
Do you need to check about the recording?
Thank
Steve?
you, Rosemary. Thank you. Has anybody, just think back to names you've mentioned, things you've said. Is anybody? Let me know if you're not comfortable with me using that recording. That's probably the best way to do it. But do think, because otherwise I'll edit it and put it on the website because it's a useful resource. And I know it's got to go to. I've forgotten the town you live in anyway. To Soji to look at anyway. Good.
Did you say meeting at 8, not 7? It's 7 for you, 8 for us. Is that right?
8 for you, 8 for you, 9 for us.
Oh,
sorry,
right.
8 for the
8.
UK, 9 for France.
Okay.
Depending on who you and us are, of course. Anyway, thank you very much, everybody. Have a great afternoon.
Thank
evening.
you. Thank you,
Bye for now.
Steve.
Yeah.
Bye,
Thank you.
everybody. Bye. Bye.